Module 1, General License Activity. The purpose for this module is to familiarize trainees with the assisted living facility licensure process. The objective, upon completion of this module, the trainee will be able to define the terms assisted living facility, demonstrate knowledge of the purpose and intent of assisted living facilities, explain the difference in services provided by facilities holding a standard license and a specialty license, such as extended congregate care, ECC, limited mental health, LMH, and limited nursing services, LNS. You will also learn how to apply for an initial ALF license. You will also know how often and where to apply for a license renewal, demonstrate knowledge of the actions needed in case of transfer or change of ownership, closure of the ALF, or change of the administrator. Understand the definition of license capacity and the need to operate within the established capacity. Demonstrate knowledge of the regulations regarding ALF advertising. One point one, define the term assisted living facility. What is an ALF? Assisted living facility means any building or buildings, section, or a distinct part of a building, private home, boarding home, home for the aged, or other residential facility, regardless of whether operated for profit, which through its ownership or management provides housing, meals, and one or more personal services for a period exceeding 24 hours to one or more adults who are not relatives of the owner or administrator. Before opening. Before opening your assisted living facility, you must first be licensed by ALF, which is the Agency for Healthcare Administration. This, well, a few different names for the same place. So let's go through a few names that they share. It's ACA, the agency central office, and the central office. These names are all important to remember.
Here we have Mrs. Jane, and Mrs. Jane is an example of a standard resident. Okay, guys, here we have Mr. Elton, and Mr. Elton is an example of our ECC resident, extended congregate care. Okay, guys, here we have Mr. Bill, and Mr. Bill is an example of an LMH resident, limited mental health. Okay, guys, here we have Mrs. Shirley, and Mrs. Shirley is one of our LNS residents, limited nursing services.
Resident review. Let's discuss the residents. Are you ready to meet your residents? Take the time to think about how you will operate your assisted living facility with these residents. Are you ready? One point two, the purpose and intent of assisted living facilities. The purpose of an assisted living facility is so that the disabled adults, elderly, can receive assistance with activities of everyday living and medication management in a residential home-like setting. The specialty license allows the residents to reside in your ALF that would have disqualified them from a standard facility. ensuring that the health, safety, and welfare of residents is preserved. Promoting and building independence, decision making, individuality, dignity, and privacy also plays a part in the assisted living facilities. Enjoying leisure activities and ensuring that other services are provided, like social services, mental health services, economic services, etc. Involving residents with community-based programs also play a role with the ALF plan. One of the main goals that you will remember during this course is to age in place. That's very important. I feel like it's the main purpose and intent of an assisted living facility is to age in place. Aging in place or age in place means the process of providing increased or adjusted services to a person to compensate for the physical and mental decline that may occur with the aging process in order to maximize the person's dignity and independence and permit them to remain in a familiar, non-institutional, residential environment for as long as possible. Such services may be provided by facility volunteers, family, or friends, or through contractual arrangements with a third party staff. 1.3 Standard and Specialty License. You have a standard license. Your ECC license is Extended Congregate Care License. Your LMH license is your Limited Mental Health License. And your LNS license is your Limited Nursing Services License. Let's discuss the Standard Assisted Living Facility License. The standard license for assisted living is the base licensure that all assisted living facilities must have. It will be the most independent form of assisted living. This consists of housing and meals and services provided. Housing and meals consist of the rooms included expenses, 3 meals a day minimum, and snacks in between meals. Services provided could be assistance with or supervision of ADLs, activities of daily living, or your meds, which is medication management. So this also consists of 24-hour provision, housing, meals, personal care, which are the services provided, activities of daily living, which is also services provided, and medication assistance, which is also a service provided. Personal care must be provided at your assisted living facility. Otherwise, it wouldn't be an assisted living facility. No personal care equals no ALF. Now, at a standard ALF, this is kind of optional depending on the environment. But if you do have a licensed nurse, they can administer medication and manage pill organizers. An unlicensed person is very popular with assisted living facilities. And that basically means an individual not currently licensed to practice nursing or medicine who is employed or under contract to an assisted living facility and who has received training with respect to assistant with the self-administration of medication or other tasks in an assisted living facility as provided under statutes 429.52 prior to providing such assistance as described in this section. So get reading this slide or whatever, I wanted to break down kind of the do's and don'ts what an unlicensed person can and can't do. So this page kind of helps you out with that. Try to pay attention to the colors because that'll also help you out with what can be done and what can't be done. So let's jump right into it. An unlicensed person means an individual not currently licensed to practice nursing. Although an unlicensed person can take the medication in its previously dispensed, properly labeled container from where it is stored and bringing it to the resident. In the presence of the resident, reading the label, opening the container, removing a prescribed amount of medication from the container, and closing the container. An unlicensed person can also assist a resident whose condition is medically stable with the self-administration of routine, regularly scheduled medications that are intended to be self-administered. Assistance with self-administration does not include mixing, compounding, converting, or calculating medication doses, except for measuring a prescribed amount of liquid medication or breaking a scored tablet or crushing a tablet as prescribed. Medications for which the time of administration, the amount, the strength of a dosage, the method of administration, or reason for administration requires judgment or discretion on the part of the unlicensed person, we will not assist in those situations. So in those situations that are red, we do not do that. In the situations that are blue, we can do that as an unlicensed person. Informed consent. This is basically like giving permission, but it means advising the resident or the resident surety guardian or attorney, in fact, that an assisted living facility is not required to have a licensed nurse on staff, that the resident may be receiving assistance with self-administration of medication or other tasks from an unlicensed person, and that such assistance, if provided by an unlicensed person, will or will not be overseen by a licensed nurse. So in the state of ALF, residents can only ride the bed for 7 days, meaning they can only stay in that bed for 7 days. So it's 7 days in a week. They cannot go longer than that in a bed. That's the best way I can break it down. So bed rides they can be 7 days, but they can't be more than 7 days. So on that eighth day, they need to get out of bed and do some activities of daily living or something. So remember, the days in the beds are basically bedridden days. And in the standard ALF, it doesn't go past 7. Residents can only ride the bed for 7 days in its standard ALF. Now this may change with specialty licenses, but with your standards, your walkie-talkies, they need to get out of bed after 7 days. So a standard resident in a standard ALF can't be in the bed more than 7 days. That could be a violation of your facility. You don't want to get fined for anything as small as getting someone out the bed. So just remember, in a standard ALF, they can't be more than 7 days in the bed. This is our friend who is a standard resident. Her name is Lucy, and she does basically everything on her own. She is a walking, talking resident who takes pretty much good health, and she needs minimum assistance with almost anything. Uh, this is what most standard residents will be like. So now that we know about the standard license, let's compare that to our specialty license. Let's see how they differ. Moving forward, we will explain the difference in services provided by facilities holding a standard license and specialty license, such as extended congregate care, ECC, limited mental health, LMH, and limited nursing services, LNS. Standard versus specialty. In your standard license, it'll be your initial application, and everything is pretty much basic. It's your least restrictive license that you can obtain, and it's the easiest to obtain. Now, your specialty license is a little more complicated, but you apply separate from your initial application. These residents and things that you may need to go through as far as training is a little more advanced than the basic standard license. There will be more guidelines and training to follow and meet, and this may require more staff with your specialty licenses. Your specialty licenses are extended congregate care, that's your ECC, your limited mental health, that's your LMH, and limited nursing services, that's your LNS. The specialty licenses allow the residents to reside in your ALF that would have disqualified them from a standard facility. The specialty license may have a special requirement per special license. This allows residents to age in place. So let's take a look at this image we have on the screen here. So specialty license are add-ons to your standard ALF. So look at the standard house in the back. That's basically your ALF. Any ALF would need that standard license. Now, if you see the circles, those are your specialty licenses. That's like an add-on to your standard. So you can have one or all of the specialty licenses, but just remember you all will need a standard license first. Let's discuss our extended congregate care license. Any facility intending to establish extended congregate care services must obtain a license from the agency before accepting residents needing extended congregate care services. Apply for this license separate from the initial standard license. Automatically issued this specialty after being open as an ALF for 2 years. Directly contracted third party. This license can also be issued with an initial application when an ALF first opens. It will be issued as a provisional license if all requirements are met to operate with an ECC license, not to exceed 6 to 12 months. After a successful survey of meeting the compliant requirement for the program, the license will be issued without it being provisional. Only the portion of a facility that meets the physical requirements for extended congregate care can receive the services provided for the extended congregate care program. Licensed nurses must provide the nursing services that support their specialty. Licensed practical nurse, LPN, registered nurse, RN, and etc. Contracted third parties and staff providing nursing services must participate in monthly nursing assessments, written progress reports, creation of a service plan for the residents. Residents that are enrolled under this license may receive total care with 4 ADLs: bathing, dressing, grooming, and toileting. Licensed nurses and certified nursing assistants can perform within their scope of practice with these residents. Unlicensed staff must take the proper training to meet the requirements to work with these residents. And though some may be licensed and certified, the ECC program does require mandatory training for all staff, including the administrator. Designate an ECC supervisor. Program planning, services provided planning, ensuring residents have an updated health examination before enrolling. Health exam is required at the time of admission. Health exam is also required annually, every year, after being admitted. This program will require additional training and additional staff. Dementia is the loss of cognitive functioning, thinking, remembering, and reasoning to such an extent that it interferes with a person's daily life and activities. Cognitive impairments is when a person has trouble remembering, learning new things, concentrating, or making decisions that affect their everyday life. Care may be provided for terminally ill residents that no longer meet the criteria for an ALF under the Extended Congregate Care Specialty License if the resident qualifies for, is admitted to, and provides consent to the services from a licensed hospice. Hospice coordinates and ensures the provision of any additional services that may be needed. A facility that is licensed to provide extended congregate care services must demonstrate the capability to meet unanticipated resident service needs, offer a physical environment that promotes a home-like setting, provides for residents' privacy, promotes resident independence, and allows sufficient congregate space as defined by rule. Have sufficient staff available, taking into account the physical, plant, and fire safety features of the building to assist with the evacuation of residents in an emergency. Adapt and follow policies and procedures that maximize resident independence, dignity, choice, and decision making to permit residents to age in place, so that moves due to changes in functional status are minimized or avoided. Allow residents, or if applicable, a resident's representative, the NE, surrogate, guardian, or attorney-in-fact to make a variety of personal choices, participate in developing service plans, and share responsibility in decision-making. Implement the concept of managed risk. Provide directly or through contract the service of a person licensed under Part 1 of Chapter 464. In addition to the training mandated in Statutes 429.52, provide specialized training as defined by rule for facility staff. Policies and procedures established through extended congregate care services must promote resident independence, dignity, choice, and decision making. This is important. The facility must develop and implement specific written policies and procedures that addresses the following: aging in place. The facility residency criteria developed in accordance with the admission and discharge requirements. The personal and supportive services the facility intends to provide, how the services will be provided, and the identification of staff positions to provide the services, including their relationship to the facility. The nursing services the facility intends to provide, identification of staff positions to provide nursing services, and the license status, duties, general working hours, and supervision of such staff. Identifying potential unscheduled resident service needs and mechanisms for meeting those needs, including the identification of resources to meet those needs. A process for mediating conflicts among residents regarding choice of room or apartment and roommate. How to involve residents in decisions concerning the resident. The service must provide opportunities and encouragement for the resident to make personal choices and decisions. If a resident needs assistance to make choices or decisions, a family member or other resident representative must be consulted. To participate in the process of developing, implementing, reviewing, and revising the resident service plan. To remain in the same room in the facility except that a current resident transferring into an extended congregate care service may be required to move to the part of the facility licensed for extended congregate care, if only part of the facility is so licensed. To select among social and leisure activities. To participate in activities in the community. At a minimum, the facility must arrange transportation to such activities if requested by the resident, and to provide input with respect to the adoption and amendment of a facility policy and procedures. And remember, with our ECC residents, they get total help with bathing, dressing, grooming, and toileting. With the extended congregate care residents, they can bed ride for 14 days, meaning they can stay in the bed for 2 weeks and it be okay. With our standard ALF, it was 7. With our ECC residents, it's 14. It cannot be more than 14. So this is exactly 2 weeks. Bed rides can't be more than 14 days. 2 weeks. No more than 2 weeks. Specialty license. Limited mental health in a facility that serves one or more mental health resident must obtain a limited mental health license. A facility that has a limited mental health license may enter into a cooperative agreement with a private mental health provider. For purposes of the limited mental health license, the private mental health provider may act as the case manager. Residents under this license are classified to have a mental disorder that has been determined by the Social Security Administration. Under this license, the resident receives special benefits like SSDI or SSI and OSS. A facility that is licensed to provide service to mental health residents must provide appropriate supervision and staffing to provide for the health, safety, and welfare of such residents. Any facility intending to admit one or more mental health resident must obtain a limited mental health license from the agency before accepting the mental health resident. Facilities applying for a limited mental health license that have uncorrected deficiencies or violations found during the facility's last survey, complaint investigation, or monitoring visit will be surveyed before the issuance of a limited mental health license to determine if such deficiencies or violations have been corrected. Cooperative agreement means a written statement of understanding between a mental health care provider and the administrator of the assisted living facility with a limited mental health license in which a mental health resident is living. The agreement must specify directions for assessing emergency and after-hours care for the mental health resident. A single cooperative agreement may service all mental health residents who are clients of the same mental health care provider. Community Living Support Plan. means a written document prepared by a mental health resident and the resident's mental health case manager in consultation with the administrator of an assisted living facility with a limited mental health license or the administrator's designee. A copy must be provided to the administrator. The plan must include information about the supports, services, and special needs of the resident, which enables the resident to live in the assisted living facility, and a method by which the facility staff can recognize and respond to the signs and symptoms particular to that resident, which indicates the need for professional services. To obtain a limited mental health license, a facility must hold a standard license, as an assisted living facility must not have any current uncorrected violations and must ensure that within 6 months after receiving a limited mental health license, the facility administrator and the staff of the facility who are in direct contact with mental health residents must complete training of no less than 6 hours related to their duties. This designation may be made at the time of initial licensure or relicensure or upon request in writing by a licensee under this part and part 2 of Chapter 408. Notification of approval or denial of such request shall be made in accordance with this part 2 of Chapter 408, and applicable rules. The training must be provided by or approved by the Department of Children and Families, DCF. Have a copy of each mental health resident's community living support plan and the cooperative agreement with the mental health care service provider, or provide written evidence that a request for the community living support plan and the cooperative agreement was sent to the Medicaid managed care plan and managing entity under contract with the Department of Children and Families within 72 hours after admission. The support plan and the agreement may be combined. Have documentation provided by the department that each mental health resident has been assessed and determined to be able to live in the community in an assisted living facility that has a limited mental health license, or provide written evidence that a request for documentation was sent to the department within 72 hours after admission. Make the community living support plan available for inspection by the resident's legal guardian, or healthcare surrogate, and other individuals who have a lawful basis for reviewing this document. Assist the mental health resident in carrying out the activities identified in the resident's community living support plan. Limited Nursing Service Specialty License, LNS. Limited nursing services. Any facility intending to provide limited nursing services must obtain a license from the agency. Nursing services. In addition to any nursing service permitted under a standard license pursuant to Section 429.255, use of personnel, emergency care, Florida statutes, a facility with a limited nursing service license may provide nursing care to residents who do not require 24-hour nursing supervision and residents who do require 24-hour nursing care and are enrolled in hospice. A patient who receives limited nursing services under this part must meet the admission criteria established by the agency for assisted living facilities. When a resident no longer meets the admission criteria for a facility licensed under this part, arrangements for relocating that person shall be made in accordance with statutes 429.28 LK, unless the facility is licensed to provide extended congregate care services. So 429.28 L is no resident of a facility shall be deprived of any civil or legal rights, benefits, or privileges guaranteed by law, the Constitution of the State of Florida, or the Constitution of the United States as a resident of a facility. At least 45 days notice of relocation or termination of residency from the facility, unless for medical reasons the resident is certified by a physician to require an emergency relocation to a facility providing a more skilled level of care, or the resident engages in a pattern of conduct that is harmful or offensive to other residents. In the case of a resident who has been adjudicated mentally incapacitated, the guardian shall be given at least 45 days notice of non-emergency relocation of residency termination. Reasons for relocation must be set forth in writing and provided to the resident or a resident's legal representative. The notice must state the resident may contact the state long-term care bondsman's program for assistance with relocation and must include the statewide toll-free telephone number of this program. In order for a facility to terminate the resident of an individual without notice as provided herein, the facility shall show good cause in court of competent jurisdiction. A licensed nurse must be available as needed. Healthcare providers authorize an order for the service the nurses provide. A copy of this order must be submitted and maintained in the resident's record. Extra documentation may be documented. Charting. Nurses are required to keep progress notes for the limited nursing services provided for the resident under this license. Progress notes must include name, title and position, date, scope of service, amount, duration, outcome of the service provided, general status of the resident's health. Progress notes must include the time and date a nurse or any staff communicated with the healthcare provider about a limited nursing resident. Must also include healthcare provider's name, healthcare provider's employer, healthcare provider's contact information, and the purpose of the call. Progress notes should be in record along with monthly nursing assessments. Applying for an ALF license. When applying for an ALF license, contact the Agency of Healthcare Administration. You can do it by mail, phone, or website. The Agency for Healthcare Administration provides initial license. They also conduct initial inspection. The agency will do the follow-up on complaints and grievances. The agency will also investigate unlicensed facilities and approve specialty licenses. Department of Health, they monitor the safety, sanitation, and food hygiene at assisted living facilities in Florida. So within 30 days of your application, you want to contact your fire marshal, that's local or state, with the written request. Local zoning. You're going to contact local zoning to meet local zoning standards and obtain occupational license for your assisted living facility. Proof of liability insurance for your assisted living facility to be covered. This involves staff, residents, and the building, your business. So the standard license will be issued to an applicant at the time of initial licensure, license renewal, or change of ownership. This is issued when the applicant is in compliance with all statutory requirements and agency rules. Can be granted if you apply for a specialty license with your initial application. So your initial application for licensure, it actually this provisional license will allow you to have that license, but you're basically supervised. So making an application for a change of ownership, you'll be supervised. That new administrator will come in and he'll be supervised for no longer than 6 to 12 months. And then you have to write a letter of admission to ACA. Know how often and where to apply for license renewal. So the license renewal application process is every 2 years. Obtain application package for license renewal 90 days prior to expiration. Submission to ACA in the ALF department. Filing time frame is 60 days prior to expiration, or you may see a late fee. Required renewal application and limited mental health licenses expire at the same time as the facility's standard license, regardless of when issued. And this is 429.17 Florida statutes. No license. At the time of license renewal, the facility is found to have uncorrected violations, limited to 6 months. The agency will need the approved plan of correction. This is 58A-5.014 in parentheses 3, Florida Administration Code, and 429.17 in parentheses 4, Florida statutes. Understanding knowledge of the action needed in case of transfer, change of ownership, closure of the ALF, or change of the administrator. Sale or transfer of ownership of a facility. It is the intent of the legislature to protect the rights of the residents of an assisted living facility when the facility is sold or the ownership thereof is transferred. Therefore, in addition to the requirements of Part 2 of Chapter 408, whenever a facility is sold or the ownership thereof is transferred, including leasing, the transferee shall notify the residents in writing of the change of ownership within 7 days after receipt of the new license. The transferor of a facility, the license of which is denied pending an administrative hearing shall, as a part of the written change of ownership contract, advise the transferee that a plan of correction must be submitted by the transferee and approved by the agency at least 7 days before the change of ownership, and that failure to correct the condition which resulted in the moratorium pursuant to Part 2 of Chapter 408 or denial of licensure is grounds for denial of the transferee's license. Effective dates of change of ownership. A change of ownership application must include the effective date of the change of ownership. The change of ownership effective date cannot be prior to the date the application is received by the agency. Failure to submit an application for licensure prior to the effective date of change of ownership to a different legal entity constitutes unlicensed activity. The effective date of the change of ownership shall not be extended more than 60 days from the effective date reported on the application. Written notification of change and the effective date must be received by the agency prior to the original reported effective date. The agency will deem the application withdrawn if the change of ownership does not occur within 60 days of the reported effective date. All required application documents and information must be received with the application or within 21 days of the request by the agency, with the exception of the transferee's proof of right to occupy if required, which must be received by the agency within 10 days after the effective date. When a change of ownership application is submitted during the review of a renewal licensure application, the pending renewal will be administratively withdrawn from review if the change of ownership application is approved with an effective date prior to the expiration of the license. Expiration of a license prior to the approval of the change of ownership application, when no renewal application has been submitted, will result in the denial of change of ownership application. If the applicant has not been issued the license on the effective date of the change of ownership, documentation must be submitted that provides for continuation of operation of the licensee for those days between the date of the change of ownership and the date the applicant is licensed by the agency. Change of ownership is official when a licensee sells or transfers to an individual or entity, resulting in a new EIN number, taxpayer ID number. Okay, at the time of transfer, the transferor or the old owner is responsible for and liable for the lawful operation of the facility and welfare of residents until the date the transfer is actually approved by the agency and they have a new license. If you were denied a license pending an administrative hearing, you need to advise in writing to the transferee or the new owner that they must submit a plan of corrective action to ACA. If you are the transferee or the new owner, you must submit a plan of correction action to ACA, and this must have the agency's approval at least 7 days before this change of ownership occurs. Notify each resident in writing 7 days after they get the new license from ACA. transferor or the old owner should transfer residents' funds and valuable possessions. They should also provide residents a statement of their funds and how it will be handled and where it could be located. You're also going to transfer over the bills. And the new owner or the transferee should provide proof of transfer to ACA, notify residents how the money will be held, where it will be held, and the amount being held, and the bills. So the responsibility for the old owners is to notice of change of ownership to residents and hand off residents' funds. The new responsibility for the new owner will be a conditional license, most likely, show compliance with plan of correction if needed, and any denial of renewal posted. Any facility whose owner fails to apply for a change of ownership license and operates the facility under the new ownership is subject to a fine of $5,000. Upon closure of your ALF, you might want to give out written notice to ACA, which is the Agency for Healthcare Administration, and your residents. You want to protect your residents' rights and keep our residents' records organized. Notice of change of administrator. If during the period for which a license is issued, the owner changes administrators, the owner must notify the agency of the change within 10 days and provide documentation within 90 days that the new administrator meets educational requirements and has completed the applicable core educational requirements under statutes 429.52. A facility may not be operated for more than 120 consecutive days without an administrator who has completed the core educational requirements. The owner must notify the agency of the change within 10 days. Provide documentation within 90 days that the new amended educational requirements and has completed the applicable educational requirements. A facility may not be operated more than 120 consecutive days without an administrator who has completed the core educational requirements. License capacity cannot exceed your approved license capacity except during a state of emergency. This is ACA's approval. May require an additional inspection for fire safety and sanitations. Knowledge of the regulations regarding ALF advertising. Advertise means any written, printed, oral, visual, or electronic promotion, statement of availability, qualification, services offered, or other similar communications appearing in or on television, radio, the internet, billboards, newspapers, magazines, business cards, flyers, brochures, or other medium for the purpose of attracting potential residents to an assisted living facility. A complimentary listing of a licensed facility name, address, and telephone number in the telephone directory is not considered advertising. Advertising your assisted living facility. Spell out assisted living facility. You can't use AF. Advertise when your facility is built, not under construction. Place your assisted living facility license number on the advertisement if advertised as an assisted living facility. Module 1 Conclusion. We defined the term assisted living facility, demonstrated knowledge of the purpose and intent of an assisted living facility. We explained the difference in services provided by facilities holding a standard license and specialty license, such as extended congregate care, ECC, limited mental health, LMH, and limited nursing services, LNS. We also went over how to apply for an initial ALF license. We now know how often and where to apply for license renewal, demonstrate knowledge of the actions needed in case transfer or change of ownership, closure of your ALF, or change of the administrator. Understand the definitions and license capacity and the need to operate within the established capacity. And I believe we demonstrated knowledge of the regulations regarding ALF advertising.